call the meeting to order. If we could stand for the pledge. Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. I'd like to welcome everyone to the October Committee, the whole meeting for the Community High School District 94 Board of Education. Mission statement, please.
Community High School strives to promote and provide growth experiences in learning, leadership, and living.
Thank you, Rich. Board agreements, please.
Public comment. We understand that board meetings are meetings of the board held in public, not open forum town hall meetings. We will keep this in mind as we conduct our meetings, allowing the public to provide input at the time allotted on the agenda to ensure that multiple voices of the community are heard. The public has a right to participate in the meeting only during designated public comment time. Individuals that would like can address the board with a 5-minute time limit. Procedures for public comment are clear and available at the meeting site. The board president will welcome any guests and review the public comment procedures. Only the board president will respond to public comment during the meeting. The board president may recognize the superintendent for factual information.
Thank you, Lynn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Casey Mayer?
Here.
Mr. Ramus?
Present by phone to tell people.
Mr. Nagel?
Present.
Mr. Sake?
Present by speakerphone, Media House.
All right, and speaking of public participation, that brings us to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where any member of the public can address the Board of Education on any topic. We welcome your comments and will carefully listen to your concerns. We will not be able to engage in a dialogue during public participation, but when appropriate, we will direct the administration to follow up. Presentations are limited to no more than 5 minutes per person, with a total time limit of 30 minutes for public participation. If you wish to make personal charges or complaints against individual employees, volunteers, or students of the district, we request that you send the board your concerns in writing rather than stating those concerns during public comment. If anyone currently present wishes to make public comment and hasn't already done so, please fill out one of the comment forms in the back of the room and hand it to someone seated at the table. At this point, we have received no electronic public comments and received no papers, so we will move on. That brings us to reports and information. Grading at West Chicago Community High School.
So this is the first of the board meeting, COW meetings, in which we're going to have presentations primarily from the teaching learning area, and Mary Howard, assistant principal, and going to speak on grading along with Great.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank you so much for giving me this time to talk with you a little bit about the work that our staff and faculty have been doing on grading policies and practices since 2021. I'm going to share with you an abbreviated version of a presentation that Dr. Dwyer and I gave on open house night to parents. It was delivered both in English and Spanish that evening. And what this will be is kind of giving you just the general overview of areas of focus. So we'll begin with the review of kind of our common purpose for grading. We'll look at how we have defined the meaning of grading for equity. We'll articulate what we mean by meaningful grades, highlight the structural supports that you as a board and the taxpayers have funded, and conclude with the current work that we have 3 groups of faculty engaging in. If we think back on our own experience as students or the experiences that we had as parents of school-aged children, many of us would agree that we believe there was one purpose for grades, and that was report cards. As a staff, we've learned that we need to have a common purpose and a collective understanding of the meaning of grades, as well as who uses them and how they use them. When we began discussing grading as an administrative team and then as a staff, we asked the question, what is the purpose of grades? Today, our answer is that the purpose of grades is to communicate what a student has learned and has yet to learn to the student, the teacher, family, potential bosses, colleges, employers. I'd like to highlight for a moment the focus on learning not only what the student knows and is able to do, but also what the student has not yet mastered. That's critical because this philosophy brings content and skill standards into the forefront. Our curriculum and assessments are tied to national or state standards so that our students have a common experience across different sections of the same course, and they're learning the content and skills that professionals in these areas value and rely on. It's critical for us to understand that grades are used both inside and outside of school. So not only do they inform teachers and students about teaching and learning, but they also communicate to other faculty and staff the level of support or challenge that a student needs. Grades also measure a student's readiness for subsequent courses, are converted into a student's GPA, and determine eligibility for graduation. One thing that we often don't remember is that grades also result in awards and rewards. So we often think about academic awards and scholarships as a result of grades, but we don't consider car insurance rates, job offers, or discounts that have financial implications for students and their families. So each of these uses demonstrate that we need to have equitable grading practices to ensure that a student's transcript is accurate and meaningful. Now that we have a common understanding of why we grade, the widespread uses of grades and their impact, I'd like to contrast equality and equity and stress how important equitable grading is. There are a variety of versions of this image that are used in the educational community, and it illustrates the differences between today's reality, equality, and equity. The circles in the reality column emphasize the opportunity gaps that exist in society as a whole and in our community in particular. It's our moral responsibility to address these gaps. So the question is, how do we do that? Although some may believe that equality is the answer, the second image illustrates that providing everyone with the same opportunities and resources does not facilitate success for all. Therefore, the third image demonstrates that equity is our current goal. We're working toward providing each student with opportunities, experiences, and resources that they individually need to succeed. Equitable grading policies and practices are one component of our efforts. In August, we formally shared our, quote, grading philosophy with all staff. You could please take a moment and go ahead and review it. The third sentence is the most relevant. Consistent feedback, assessment, and grading policies and practices that are aligned at the division and course team level support student growth and learning. What we've discovered is that varied grading policies and practices can have unintended consequences. So for example, the assessments and assignments that are entered in the gradebook, how homework and tests are weighted, how many assessments are given, even the use of extra credit, are only some of the factors that impact grades and unfortunately do not necessarily reflect learning. So a lack of alignment that's unintentional can skew grades and make them less accurate. So currently, we've taken 3 steps to improve the accuracy of grades. The first one is that we're very focused on teaching and assessing standards through common course assessments. So 25 years ago when I started in teaching, I was essentially given 3 textbooks and kind of said, you know, go on your way. So that's a very different experience from what teachers have now, where we have a common curriculum that everyone who teaches the same course uses, and we have common assessments. We've also made a change where we're weighing assessments more heavily than any kind of homework, classwork, or some kind of practice. And we've also moved to implement and now encourage students to retake assessments. Alignment to standards provides students with access to rigorous content and skills, which is vital. Prioritizing assessments enables students to take risks and make mistakes while they're learning. And instituting retakes communicates that we value learning rather than grades, and that we believe that all students can and will learn. Retakes are a cornerstone of equitable grading. A retake is an opportunity for students to take additional time to master a skill or content and then demonstrate what they have learned without any kind of academic penalty. The retake process encourages students to identify what they still need to learn and make the effort to do so. We look at retakes as one way to teach grit and growth mindset and to empower students to own their own learning. Since access and opportunity are a continued focus, we've been committed to creating times and places where students can access academic resources and have the opportunity to complete retakes. So we'll briefly look at how WeGo is supporting student learning and how families can partner with us. Since the pandemic, we've been fortunate to expand our academic supports through both classes and additional resources. So today, students can enroll in a class that creates time in their daily schedule to review, to learn, and retake, including AVID, Core Lab, SRC. We have EL study skills, as well as study skills to support special education needs. Individual and small group reteaching and retakes are also available during den time in academic support and after school during tutoring. As students become high schoolers, we attempt to teach them self-advocacy and independence. However, adult support is still necessary. So parents, guardians, and family members can help their student by prioritizing attendance and being on time. So we know that chronic absenteeism and truancy often result in failing classes and losing credit. So consistent attendance makes it possible for students to learn. I also wanted to highlight, as you know, and have funded, we offer free breakfast every day at doors B and H through first hour. Hungry kids can struggle to focus and stay awake, and all teenagers just in general can benefit from starting their day energized. So it's something we really ask parents to emphasize with their students. Another important way that adults can support their students is to check PowerSchool regularly and communicate first with their child and then with teachers as needed. Now that we're approaching the middle of the semester and more assessments have been given, parents can use PowerSchool to gauge how their student is doing and what are the next steps to support their future growth. And obviously then, as we mentioned numerous times, promoting retakes is a way to lead to student learning and achievement. I did want to give a quick commercial for parent-teacher conferences. Anyone who logs into the website will see a pop-up reminding people that parent-teacher conferences are later this month and that they have the opportunity to schedule them now. So that's definitely a key way for parents to be able to support their student learning. The fifth and final section of the presentation outlines the grading work that is currently ongoing in the district. Approximately 24 teachers are participating in grading pilots this year. So pilot number 1 is comprised of a group of teachers who are tracking student retake data. They're gathering information about how many students complete retakes in their classes, the impact of retakes on the student grades, consequences when students do not complete a retake. They're looking at the particular grade a student earned and whether that may or may not influence their likelihood to take a retake. So this data is one way that can inform our future grading policies and practices. We have a second group, pilot number 2, that involves students and teachers in 5 courses who are providing in-class retakes for summative assessments. So although this procedure would not be possible in all courses due to the time constraints, the faculty who are teaching these classes are examining the effect of required retakes during class time. This model is the most equitable way to give retakes because it assures that all students are able to complete one. Our last pilot, number 3, is occurring in 15 courses throughout the building. We're excited that it's a variety of age and honors AP levels. So teachers engaged in this pilot have collapsed the grading scale so that the lowest F is a 50% rather than earning a 30, a 20, a 10. This occurs when students have not yet demonstrated basic understanding or mastery of the material or skills. Now, students who do not complete an assessment will receive a grade of NE, which means no evidence of learning, and that will calculate as a score of 40. So the students see the NE in the grade book, but behind the scenes mathematically it's 40. So this score makes it possible for students to re-engage in learning and then have the opportunity to be able to pass later in the semester. Oftentimes we see that if students have zeros in an assessment, they're 4 or 5 assessments in a semester, it can make it impossible for them to pass because of that one incident, even very early in a course. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Nick. Again, he's from our social studies department. He's been one of our lead teachers on this project since 2021. He's implemented many of these policies in his own classroom since we began this initiative 3 years ago.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick. I teach social studies. I'll start with the collapsed grading scale. 2 of those courses on that list are courses I teach. In my mind, this makes so much more sense than the traditional 0 through 100 scale. I think if we have to keep the 0 through 100, we have to collapse it. What we've been doing in U.S. history and what I've been doing in my AP class and philosophy, so I'm sorry, 3 of those classes I teach, we're A through F. We're considering them more as learning categories. So we've done away with percentages and we are collapsed the scale to where exceeds standards, meeting standards, is approaching standards, has a long way to go to approach standards, or has totally missed the mark. And by collapsing the scale that way, we can give more honest and accurate feedback to kids, to families, to everyone else. To try to explain the difference between an 82 and an 84 is kind of an exercise in silliness. Being able to explain 5 learning categories, that is much more manageable and much more real. In addition to that, as Mary mentioned, removing the concept of the 0 and just staying in proportionate distances from grade to grade just makes complete more sense, and it doesn't absolutely tank a student's semester if things don't go well right off the bat. It's still manageable to get back into the learning that's taking place in the classroom and still see some success. When those zeros start piling up, most kids just kind of throw in the towel and call it a day because it's insurmountable at that point. So my only regret about the collapsed grading scale is that it took me so long to get here. I've given our admin a lot of credit, giving us an opportunity to try some of these ideas out as 3-4 years ago. The move also to 90-10, or in some cases 100-0, I know some of my colleagues were skeptical about that, and they were worried that, well, if we remove the weight on homework, on classwork, students aren't going to do anything. They're going to blow off those assignments. My experience in all levels of my classes has actually been quite the opposite. My experience has been that the students take the assignments actually more genuinely, more authentically, because it's not a grab for points. It's practice to learn material. And the reward, if we have to think of it that way, shows up on the assessment. And so doing a more authentic, genuine job on the materials in class pays off on mastering material. So instead of some of those fears that have been out there that students aren't going to do the work if it's not weighted, has actually been quite the opposite. I find that students are doing more authentic job with the classwork because what matters now is the learning and not simple completion of material. I guess the last thing I would add, and all of this is intertwined for me, it's really a shift of thinking in terms of what we're really up to and what the purpose of the classwork is. I have moved almost entirely to getting all of our learning done in the space that we have Monday through Friday. If it's not essential and if I'm not going to assess the content or skill, it doesn't belong in the grade book. It's just inappropriate to include it there. Stress level, I think, for students has lessened. They're not being barraged with what I would argue is needless exercises and work completion outside of their already super busy day. And the proof, at least in my mind, has been in the outcomes. For my AP students, we have consistently scored well above the national average every year we've done this. In fact, with increasing scores, and I can say that's honestly with not a single homework assignment signed over the course of an entire year. And scores are still exceeding the national, actually global average by double digits in terms of percentages. So again, my only regret is that we didn't start this much earlier, but it has been extremely positive from my vantage point. Again, I do thank district and admin for encouraging us to take these risks and trying these new ways of grading. So, thank you.
Conclude, I'd like to extend a quick thank you to Nick for sharing his personal grading evolution and implementing these policies and practices. I'd also like to thank our faculty and staff collectively for engaging in this very challenging work. This is not something that comes easily or naturally. We're changing the way that we've done things for a number of years. Most definitely, I'd like to acknowledge the teachers who are participating in the pilots this year, the staff who work in our support classes, academic support, and tutoring for the work they're doing. Nick was one of the people also who is in our first grading group in 2021 who engaged in the book Grading for Equity, which we've based most of our work on. That's by Joel Feldman. Faculty have provided professional development on this topic. We have a current new group of faculty who are engaging in reading the book. Just as Nick did, I'd like to thank the administration, particularly the division heads and directors, for the work that they're doing with students and teachers every day on standards, curriculum, assessments, and grading. And finally, I would really like to thank you for what you've invested in each step of this process. Our grading work is going to continue over the next few years, and it's because of the resources that you have provided to make this possible. We're grateful for your time and commitment to the best interest of our students in the district. So thank you again for your time.
you.
Welcome.
Any questions from anyone?
I'm intrigued by the retake concept.
Sure.
What does that mean? If I don't do well on a test, I retake the test?
So ideally what it looks like is that a teacher will pass back an assessment and go through components of it with the class. They'll offer students a retake opportunity. In general, that's 2 weeks from when the test is passed back. There's an expectation that the teacher requires the students to do something to learn that material. So oftentimes teachers will require a student to come in individually and go through what it is they've missed, do some kind of new learning so that they're not going through the same process they already did. And then it should be a cold or a new assessment that's going to assess the same skills as the one prior, but it wouldn't be an identical version of the test. And also, we're encouraging them to reassess on only the standards that they've missed. So if it's a very lengthy assessment, we don't need them to retake the things we already know that they know how to do. We want them to focus in on the things that they have not yet learned and then demonstrate their mastery of that.
So is the retake still sitting down with a piece of paper as a test and filling it out kind of thing?
Whatever the test was, if it's a Socratic seminar, a paper, a lab, yeah, whatever it would be, a hard copy test, yes, it will be.
Okay, I guess I like the concept, but I would argue from experience that taking a test doesn't necessarily fully describe the learning that may have occurred. I think there are maybe some percentage of students that know material but aren't able to express it in tests. And I guess I would challenge the people to look at other ways of determining and assessing learning besides just a 10-question multiple choice test or something.
That's everything we're doing. So it's generally a retake on not just the assessment, but as Mary said, the portions. And so I don't even enter exam grades anymore. I enter into our school by the learning objectives. So they'll take one exam or one assessment, whatever that might look like, and they could have 6 different grades in there, so we can really pinpoint how well they did. The tests, to be honest, very few are multiple choice anymore. Short answer writing, could be project-based, and to be honest, I've done retakes that are as simple as a conversation after class. Where, hey, Cecilia, you didn't do so well on this one learning objective. That surprises me. You seemed like you knew this in class. She'll explain it to me, but okay, cool. For me, that's good enough for a retake. I can go back and then change the grade. So it's not as simple as here's 10 new multiple choice questions. It's much more nuanced than that.
I appreciate that from your standpoint. I guess I'm hoping that filters through the rest of the faculty at looking at other ways of assessing the knowledge.
We're turning a battleship, not a speedboat.
We're getting there.
I definitely think that one of the ways that we can kind of measure that change is a number of years ago, we had invested in Mastery Manager, and that was a way to auto score similar to Scantron assessments. And that's something that, we've moved away from, as well as a lot of, places in DuPage County and across the country, for exactly what you're saying, is that multiple choice is going to be one of the, least effective ways to be measuring understanding. So that's the percentage of people who are using that. It's fewer and fewer as we go, definitely year by year.
But thank you.
Sure.
I noticed in the presentation that there was a comment that some classes, notably like music, art, physical ed, are exempt from some of these. Can you talk about how they're
Sure.
doing things differently?
One of the conversations that we had with DHs and then departments themselves is, especially in performance-based courses, as well as in our special education courses, that non-negotiable that we've created of a minimum of 90% assessments may not be appropriate. And so those are conversations that are had at the department level about what that should look like in terms of best practice grading.
It would be interesting to get some feedback from students that have actually done some retakes.
Yeah.
To see what they feel it's doing for them as part of our, bringing information up from the ground floor.
So we had tried to do that. It was just too short a time period before the meeting, Rich, but that was our goal, was with every presentation. We have a teacher, thank you, Nick, as well as students to inform the board from their perspective.
And maybe at the end of the year, it would be nice to hear more on this as to how it does pan out over the year. Thank you. It's really amazing. And I really appreciate the move away from giving an overwhelming amount of busy work, homework.
Yeah.
I think that, like what Nick said, a lot of all this can be completed during school hours. And so why overburden them? Which to me just kind of creates an atmosphere of potential failure, so, because you just can't keep up. So, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Not to mention the stress.
Yeah, the stress, yeah.
I have a question about Power School.
Pardon me?
He's got a question about Power School.
I have a question about Power School.
It's Gary on the phone.
And the question I have is, do we track what parents are engaged on Power School and which ones are not? Particularly, in other words, are the right parents engaged with Power School, the ones with students that are maybe doing less than great?
Yeah, thank you, Gary. We can track which parents have logged into Power School, and I believe the frequency with which they can log in. The one blind spot there, though, is if the student and the parent have shared that password or shared that login, oftentimes the kid might log in as the parent to check a grade, even though they, in the system, they have separate student login and parent login. But yes, we are available to see who has and has not gone in.
Do you have that data?
I don't have it handy, but I can get it for you.
I would appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding grading? Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And that brings us to our audit presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. My name is Taryn Bruce, and I am the manager on the district's FY23 financial statement audit. Thank you for having me here this evening to discuss the 2023 audit results, and thank you for using Baker Tilly as your auditors. This evening, I will briefly highlight the more important aspects of the audit. If you have any questions regarding any of this information, please stop me at any time. The fiscal year 2023 audit procedures are complete, and our reports were issued on September 20th of 23. A small percentage of districts have issued their audits by this date. This is attributed to the diligence of the business office team. Special thanks to Dan and Chris and the entire team for their audit preparedness and their very timely responses to allow us to complete our audit timely. The scope of the fiscal year 2023 audit consists of 5 major reports: the modified cash basis financial statements, the ISB annual financial report, or the AFR, the single audit of the district's major federal programs in accordance with uniform guidance, consolidated year-end financial report, or the CIFER, and the audit results report. I will highlight the key results from the reports mentioned above, starting with the financial statements. I don't know, Dan, if they have them. I have an extra copy too if anyone wants to look at them as I go through. What? Okay. Perfect. Located on pages 1 through 3, we issued an unmodified opinion over the district's cash basis financial statements. This is the highest level of assurance that anyone can obtain from their auditors, and it means the financial statements were fairly presented in all material respects and contain all necessary disclosures. Management's discussion and analysis is on pages 4 through 10. This provides financial statement readers with the story behind the numbers presented. The statement of net position and the statement of activities, located on pages 11 and 12. These statements are presented on the full accrual basis of accounting, and this contains capital assets and their long-term liabilities. Pages 15 and 18 of the report detail the differences between the full accrual statements and the governmental fund statements. The balance sheet, which is located on pages 13 and 14. One thing to note, there is positive fund balance across all funds. There are no deficit fund balances. Statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance are located on pages 16 and 17. This is kind of where I'll go into a bit more detail. So there are a couple items to note. Total fund balances increased $3.8 million. This is primarily driven by evidence-based funding, corporate personal property replacement taxes, investment income, and a little bit of property taxes in there. Corporate personal property replacement taxes came in higher once again than the previous year. They did increase about $400,000 this year, but a thing to note, we are expecting a decrease in corporate personal property replacement taxes in '24. Another welcome increase in evidence-based funding this year. It went up about $900,000. Last year it also increased $1.2 million. Property taxes, we did see an increase of $327,000, which is likely due to property taxes received in advance. And then the big one this year with the turn of the market is the increase in investment income. That did increase about $650,000 due to the market and interest rates. The operating funds, which are shown on page 16, this includes the education fund, operations and maintenance, transportation, and the IMRF fund, did show a surplus of $3.7 million. The general fund, comprised of the education and working cash funds, had a surplus of $1.9 million. The operations and maintenance had an increase of $1.5. Transportation, an increase of $162,000. And the IMRF fund, we had revenues approximating expenditures with a slight increase of $141,000. One thing to note about your operating funds is the operating fund balance to expenditure ratio did increase to 57% this year, which is your total ending fund balances divided by your total expenditures in those funds. Following the basic financial statements are the notes to the financial statements, which provide a bit more detail around the assets and liabilities reported. And then there are budget to actual schedules by fund included as well. Does anyone have any questions kind of on the financial statements?
This is Gary. I do have a question about the secure funding. Are we approaching the point where we're going to change to the next tier and a lot of increase in revenue will drop?
Is that a question about evidence-based funding, Gary?
Right.
Yeah.
Possible change in tier.
Yeah, the evidence-based funding, so the adequacy target keeps on changing from ISB, that it increased up from 66% up to 73% this last year. And so, as you know, like we were approaching that 66% until they raised it up to 73. So to be honest, I'm not sure when we're going to change from that tier 1 to tier 2 for EBF. It could be a couple other years.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the financials? Awesome. So the next report I would like to talk about, and it's just a quick little thing on the ISB State AFR, so the annual financial report. The district did receive the recognition status, which is the highest level of recognition by ISB, the state board. The district received a score of 3.9 out of a maximum score of 4. And the only little bit that brought it down is just your long-term debt margin with the outstanding debt. The district does have strong fund balance to revenue ratios as well as strong-term expenditure to revenue ratios. So, like I said, they're 3.9 out of 4. That is all the financial information I had planned to go over, but I can also go over anything else. And then the next report to discuss is going to be the single audit. So a single audit is a federal compliance audit over the federal programs and is required by any entity that expends more than $750,000 of federal funds in a given year. Based on the analysis of programs to be tested, the Education Stabilization Fund and the IDEA Special Education Cluster were identified for testing and audited as major programs this year. The Education Stabilization Fund had expenditures of about $2.1 million, and the IDEA Special Education Cluster had federal expenditures of $969,000. The IDEA Cluster does take into account the IDEA Flow-Through Grant, IDEA Room and Board, and there was a piece this year funded by ARP IDEA. Under the single audit, we test to verify the district complied with all rules and to determine if adequate controls were in place to assure compliance. There were no reportable matters identified, and a clean opinion was received. There are 2 reports that we issue, or 2 opinions that go with the schedule of federal awards, and those are the GAS opinion, so governmental auditing standards. There were no findings over internal controls, and then the UG opinion, or uniform guidance, and there were no findings noted over the control of compliance. Lastly, I'll end with the audit result discussion with a few non-financial highlights. Reporting and insights from the 2023 audit deliverable. This satisfies a few different auditing standards and is very much boilerplate language due to there being nothing of concern to report. The letter addresses our responsibilities as the auditors, management responsibilities, that there were no significant changes to the audit plan, areas of focus, our thoughts on any significant risks of material misstatement, none noted, and key areas of emphasis. We gain an understanding of the district's internal controls for a purpose of planning our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of providing any assurance over the design and effectiveness of internal controls. During this time and throughout the audit, if we see matters that we believe the board should know about, we would let you guys know, but there were no material weaknesses identified during the course of the audit. We also noted no instances of noncompliance or other matters to be reported under government auditing standards. That's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
I should know this, but I don't think I've ever paid attention. What is the actual year to date for the audit? Is this calendar year or is it our fiscal year?
Fiscal year, so 7/1 through 6/30.
Okay, so this audit covers from last July 1st till this June 30th?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other audit-related questions? All right, thank you very much for your presentation. That brings us to BWP Superintendent Search Overview.
I don't know how we can top that. You had a great audit. No red flags. Good.
That's great.
Nice.
What we'd like to do tonight, Board, is update you on the search process. Most of this is just going to be information we want to share with you, and then I've already spoken to Brittany once, and I'll speak with her in the next day or two to get her in the loop to start to put some things on the website as well with that. The first item we want to start with is the search confidentiality, and Mark is going to take that item.
So this form we gave you basically is a little bit of a rehash of what we originally presented to you when we gave you a suggested timeline. What we've done is we've updated it, put it in an order, and we're going to comment basically very quickly through each of these entries. Again, keeping in mind that there's some flexibility here. Things happen, dates get moved, snowstorms happen in December. You know, things do happen. So we have to keep that in mind. It's not carved in stone. So the first thing, the only thing that's really a question when it comes to this page that we've handed out is where do we stand with the confidentiality, the limited confidentiality, or the full confidentiality issue? We talked briefly about it when we were here a couple weeks ago, and the nice piece was last week was the State Superintendent's Conference in Springfield. Was down. We got our posting up in the nick of time, inundated with questions. So for 3 days, able to talk a lot about West Chicago District 94. The questions are this: what's the board like? So we're just getting to know everybody. And 2, what type of search is it going to be? Is it going to be fully confidential? Is it going to be open? Is there going to be a hybrid or a limited type version? That's what's on people's mind. And we want to be able to give them at least some direction. Even tonight, we don't have to decide the answer, but we just need a little bit of direction so we can honestly answer people who are interested in this position and give them some direction down the end, at the end, as to what the final process is going to look like. So if we can take 2 or 3 minutes just to again talk about the limited confidentiality and the full confidentiality piece. We've eliminated, and we did that the last time, the open search, and we knew that's not going to work with us. Any thoughts on that?
Can you give us some pluses and minuses of each situation?
Well, the limited confidentiality allows you to select a group, a representative group from amongst your different constituencies, I would say, you know, administrators, parents, a representative group of like 8 to 10, to interview the final 2 candidates after you've gotten down to the final 2. The full confidentiality eliminates that piece, and it's just the board that makes the decision.
Mark mentioned with the stakeholder group, that's just an advisory group. They would not be saying and rate the candidates or do anything like that. They would just provide feedback to the board as far as what their strengths are, and then any questions that they might want to suggest the board ask in the future with that. Mm-hmm. But the most important thing is the board obviously makes the final decision on that.
So it would be a source of things to think about provided by these stakeholders as the board decides between the final candidates.
Keeping in mind, the school code is very clear. It is the Board of Education's responsibility to select, hire, and fire a superintendent. It's the only employee that the board evaluates. So that gives a little bit of a push for the board doing this process all the way through. We're okay with either. We just want to make sure we don't have candidates who back away for reasons such as I can't allow my home district to know that I'm a finalist. Because even though people sign confidentiality agreements, sometimes they talk in their sleep. You know, it just, things happen. And so we represent you. We go out on a limb and say, we trust this Board of Education. Your name isn't going to be thrown around. We want to be able to protect that at the end. So you don't have to give us a cut and stone answer. However, we are getting that question from candidates. The active pool is out there. As of today, I think we have 13 candidates.
Mm-hmm. That's a good start. I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
From past searches I've been a part of, I did, as a board member, find it very helpful to have that select group of stakeholders provide that additional thought-provoking input to the board as the board grapples with that final decision. Sometimes they think of things or highlight things that the board may not be looking at in the same way. So I found it to be useful feedback.
I think the transparency is important too, with the community, to show that we appreciate their input.
However, with the limited confidentiality, it is fully confidential up until the point that the board gets down to those last
That is correct. Say the
number,
final
2 or
two,
3, or
whatever it might be.
whatever that number is.
That's correct.
And then the participants of that stakeholder group that the board would ask to help them with that. You mentioned, Mark, that they would sign confidential agreements. So it's in writing that they understand that they're not allowed to share it. Hopefully they don't talk in their sleep, but they're fully aware of what that responsibility is. And then, depending on the timeline, hopefully it's a short turnaround, so the open exposure of those final 2 candidates
You want to almost
would be
have them
pretty
back to
limited.
back, John.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
No time in between for discussion or slippage, so to
So
speak.
basically, we're down to our couple finalists. The stakeholders have this opportunity to meet them and hear them. That information is then provided to the board, and then very quickly at that point, the board decides which way we're going to go, using whatever the board is considering, as well as possible considerations from the input from the stakeholders.
Get the feedback from them. We advise that they give individual feedback and not as a group process, but an individual feedback from that. You just get it, as you said before, that quick turnaround is extremely important, so it's not a big lag in
What I
between
had
them.
seen in past searches was the board was each given a stack of forms that each person on this stakeholders group filled out
Exactly, Bob.
with comments, thoughts, things you may want to ask, and then the board just took time and read through it, and, okay, it's one more thing to consider.
That's the process.
Just to add a fine point, this, either limited or full, occurs at the end of the process.
Yes,
because
this
there
is all
i-
down the road.
When we're down to the very end.
Because there are opportunities for input by all the stakeholder groups during the process. I just wanted to add that fine point so people who are watching understand that. The question is, when do you need to know from the board which of these 2?
As I said earlier, we're fine with all this. What we need is to be able to reassure people who apply how this is going to unfold down the road. We don't want to lose one candidate because of the model that was selected. We want to lose them because they're not a good fit or they don't meet the qualifications that we set up. So that's why we're asking you, normally you wouldn't have to say anything for, another couple weeks, a couple months. But we get that question. We want to be honest and truthful with the candidates. And there are a lot of events coming up. Friday, there's another event in Lombard. There's things where we're out there, we're your agents. We're representing you. People call us, text us. Again, the state superintendent conference, a lot of talk about jobs. So with that, we want to be able to give them some direction. Now, we can beat around the bush and say there may be a small group that does final interviews prior to the board. And that's okay. If you're not 100% sure, we can go that route. We just don't want anybody backing out.
Well, let's get a sense right now from what we've discussed so far. Lynn, what's your initial take on the question?
I kind of like the idea of the limited confidentiality, but let me just ask you this real quick. Do you find that you lose many candidates when we tell them that may be our approach?
We'll lose some. We'll lose a candidate or 2. That's normal.
Do you think it's enough of potential loss that we might be concerned? Or do you think
I think we could think on our feet, and if we feel that, we might say to the candidate, hold off. And then
So you'll come back
you,
to us if we
and
want to
come back to you and
reevaluate.
say, hey, we've got somebody who's
Yeah.
the perfect fit, meets all your criteria. Can we adjust that?
Okay,
That's why I say flexibility is our
Right.
name right here.
yes.
But you could reassure all candidates who might be interested that it will be fully confidential up until the end.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we need to go away with.
Yeah.
That's the absolute, there's no reason it would not be fully confidential until the very end.
Every search is that way now.
It has to
And,
be.
You know, the old days that we were thinking about where people paraded themselves around the district, looked at the bathrooms and the kitchen, and that does not happen anymore.
What do you think?
So we have a potential of losing candidates if we go with limited confidentiality. If we go with full confidentiality, what are we losing in the process?
I don't see anybody backing away of full confidentiality.
We
No, but
lose
if-
the stakeholder input.
Right, and
some
from your experience, what is that gonna, how is that gonna impact us? I mean, we're still interviewing, we're still going through a process. It's just with less input.
Is when we have our focus groups, which we'll be talking about in a minute, we emphasize to them that through the one-on-one board interviews, through the surveys that anybody can complete, and through the focus groups, everyone will have the opportunity to provide input into the process. So that's an important factor as well with that too.
Yeah, the input piece, everybody gets that chance.
Yeah.
So,
So it seems like if we get down to 2, we have the full confidentiality anyway. If we're stopping at 4, the difference between 4, people knowing that there's 4 as opposed to people knowing that there's 2 is kind of the difference between limited and full.
look at it that way.
I mean, it's kind of a numbers and statistics kind of a question. So if we're heading in the right direction anyway, you know, we should be able to narrow it down fairly quickly, I would think.
Problem of making that decision 2 months from now, at the end of November, December, is it's not a big deal. What we're just wanting to do is be able to answer to candidates who call us, meet us, talk to us, how this process is going to unfold. It's really about the candidates, and we don't like to lose a candidate other than for not being qualified.
I guess the answer was, we would consider full confidentiality if a limited situation would put some candidates in jeopardy.
Yeah, we would come to you and say that.
Yeah, that's
Just
a
like you said
situational
earlier,
thing,
Bob.
Rich.
I mean, if
that
we're
we
not
would
in,
have.
if we're not in a situation where we're losing potentially the perfect candidate or some perfect candidates, where that, we don't know how the search is going to play out. We could end up going through the first couple rounds and, okay, we find somebody and the board just says, this is the person. This is
Could
the
be.
person we
Yeah,
want.
absolutely.
Or there might be 2 people that, it's really tough between these 2, and maybe stakeholder input could be helpful to kind of differentiate between those 2 if it's a really close call. That's where reserving the potential to do that might come in handy.
Exactly right. That's where it's a situational.
You hit it on the nose, yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, I think we can get a sense here, and we're going to do everything with the candidates that contact us and the people we talk to assure them that don't worry about your name getting out. We'll cross that bridge at the end. There could possibly be an opportunity for a confidential stakeholder group to meet with the fund. That hasn't been determined yet.
Gary or Kathy, do you have any comments on this topic?
Initially, I was thinking of the partial confidentiality, but I'm leaning more towards the full confidentiality at this point, with some possibility if situations arise that we need to go outside that to talk to them.
I didn't understand what he said.
He was leaning towards full confidentiality is what he said. Kathy, any comments?
I would basically agree with Gary. I'm leaning toward full confidentiality.
Okay, so is it fair at this point, since there are some differences of opinion, to kind of keep the option open when we get there, but let us know if we're in danger of losing candidates, kind of?
We'll say to people who approach us is, at this point, full confidentiality till the end. If need be, we will then come back to them and say, hey, the board's decided to have a small stakeholder group assist them, giving them feedback.
So if we get to that point where it's a
If we
really
get to-
tough
right,
call
we get
between the
to that point,
finalists and the board wants that extra input.
You said it earlier, Bob, it might be a moot point. You may latch on to somebody right away and go all the way through with that person.
Like you said, you've got our backs, you're making sure we're not scaring anybody away.
That's the reason
That's
for
why
this.
we're here.
Yes.
Kathy?
Kathy?
The concern I always have with a small confidentiality group at the end is no matter how much you reiterate that this is the board decision, they do come into it thinking that they're going to be making the decision, and I feel that as long as you have focus groups throughout the process, you get effective input, and at the very end, you don't have to create that kind of angst of people who think, well, we told them this is who we want, and they chose differently. So,
We want to avoid that. Kathy's right.
Yeah, we do want to avoid that.
Yeah.
But we obviously, it sounds like you have what you need from us as far as going down the
We're
process,
good.
and we'll
We don't
see
need to beat
what we
this
end up
anymore.
with.
Yes.
Yeah, we're good with that.
Yeah, we're good.
Just to update the board from there, as Mark said, we've already posted the vacancy notice, and that's been out there and has been working very well with that. We also have started our recruiting with that, and then during the week of October 15 to 22nd, we'll be doing the online survey, which we mentioned before, and we'll be working with our person and with Brittany to get that all taken care of and to get that posted, which won't be an issue. On October 18, we've cleared the calendars from talking with the smaller group and decided that would be when the focus groups will be taken for that. And the two interim superintendents will be working on a schedule for us. And then there will be publicity. Again, I'll be talking to Brittany about having that publicized so that people are aware of those focus groups with that. During the week of October 15 also, Mark and I and Omar will provide the two interim superintendents some possible dates, and then you'll give those to the board members to sign up whenever you want to do it. And it's about a 30-minute phone interview that we'll be doing for that.
If I can
That's
interrupt.
focused on those three same questions. So that
correct.
is something for board members to start thinking about when it's your turn to have that interview, what thoughts you might want to gather for those three questions, so you're prepared.
By the way, Phil just mentioned him. He is at the IASB dinner tonight, I think.
For DuPage County.
DuPage
Yeah.
County. That's why he's not here. So he had a little bit of a conflict. That's not a big issue.
Yep, thanks. And during the week of November 6th, we'll have the leadership profile and the survey results, and we'll be able to send those to the district so they can have those, and then they can be posted also after the.
Typically, we give you, as board members, all the results a week ahead of time, let you digest it a little bit, and then we ask the district to post it on your website. The person who does all of your communications, Brittany, will then take over for that. You get a week to digest anything you see, you can let us know.
Applications close on November 15, and during that week, the three of us will start doing our screening interviews, and then on December 5, we'll be conducting a training workshop on interview techniques, how to come to a consensus, et cetera. And then also we'll be presenting to you the candidates being slated, and that will be, of course, in closed session.
So just for board members' focus, that December 5th is our regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting. So we're getting into the time where board members need to watch calendars and make sure to be available for those dates. So December 5th, COW, is going to be very important.
How are you going to think through that? We have a lot of stuff, to talk through with you. Do you want to start earlier? Do you want us to reschedule that? I don't want to get in the way of
let's get a little closer and talk about
Okay.
that.
Okay, it'll be
Need
about
to be
2
mindful.
hours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we need to be mindful of trying to avoid other agenda items for that committee of the whole
And
meeting.
that would be perfect.
The
Yeah.
best that we can, unless there's something that's absolutely
See if
necessary.
things can either be November or
Yes.
January.
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
And then kind of getting into that with those other days, it looks like the weeks of December 11th and December 18th are weeks where board members need to look at calendars and hopefully find some availability, because those are going to be very critical weeks for meetings, for interviews.
And those are holiday weeks too, or preceding the holidays, so we need to look at our
That's a
calendar.
perfect segue.
We'll start
I was just
giving
gonna
those some
mention
thoughts.
Exactly
Yeah,
that.
as when we had our Zoom meeting, I think we talked about those dates and model to use 3 per night, 2 per night for 3 nights, 3 per night, 2 nights, or using and utilizing the weekend. During that time of the year, the weekend, having 7 members free, highly doubtful.
So I guess the first step for the board members is to think individually what availability you have those 2 weeks, and, we'll start some discussion to try to find out what dates are open for everybody, and then plan accordingly.
Right,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yep.
Attila and I would like to do that sooner than later too, so please expect something from us soon on that, so we can
Okay.
get dates locked in.
Keeping in mind that through this, the candidates, that candidate pool, that Phil and I and Omar will be, I hate to use this word, but babysitting, so to speak. We will stay in touch with them. If we wind up pushing things back because of your schedules and we go into the early part of January, we will do that with these candidates. However, again, I think we said earlier, there's a lot of competition going on. There's 4 high school searches. So there's a certain candidate pool that those folks are focused on high school superintendencies. So we want to try and at least capture, our pool and keep them.
So again, you will keep us informed if it
Yes.
looks like one of our potentially good candidates might be potentially slipping away if we don't ask quickly. You'll let us know so we can see if we can tweak the schedule.
Absolutely.
That's why the sooner you can give us the dates, the better off we'll be, because we can then strategize of what we're going to do, to see where the candidates are
Yeah.
with that part of it.
Those dates, the 18th, the week, those are purely yours. We don't have to sync those dates. Those are just board member dates. So go at it.
The goal is to get that done before Christmas break. That's the target.
Very doable.
And then, as Bob just said, it'd be ideal if we can get that done before winter break, or worst-case scenario would be to do that during the week that school resumes at that point.
Because then we're at a point, once the board's made a selection, we need to go over and negotiate the contract
That could
and
bleed
and put it up for
into
approval.
rest of the year.
Right.
Probably will at that time.
Right.
But if you've identified the person, you've had the handshake agreement, and you'll have the preliminary contract in place way ahead. Your 2 interims, I know, will work with your attorney, have everything ready to just fill in the blanks. So it shouldn't slow anything down.
It also works well with the interims too, as far as the transition. There's plenty of time to have that person come on board a few days before they would actually start, which is really great. That way they have both feet on the ground. Questions that the board would have for us at this point?
How do we define our stakeholders?
How do we define the stakeholders?
Yeah, the people that'll be involved in taking the surveys and giving us feedback.
Well, the surveys
It's
go
open
out
to
to
everyone.
everybody. They'll have the link, so Rich, anybody can complete that.
So anybody, whether they're residents of the district, whether they have any involvement in the high school, can respond to the survey.
There'll be a demographic part on there, Rich, which will say, I'm an employee in the district, I'm currently a parent, or I used to have a child here. There's a different demographics that they would put on that.
Understood. And how do we avoid outside influence for people that really have no stake in what's going on, but want to provide some external inputs?
It's a leadership characteristics profile. it'd be really hard to skew it one way or another. It's almost, I don't want to say foolproof because people do, we've never really had, in other words, somebody sit there, stack the deck, do 15 responses or 20 or 30 or 40 or 100 or whatever.
Yes.
I kind of, we get that question a lot. Yeah, we've never had anybody do it in the largest communities and the smallest communities. We keep an eye on it. Our person who does the surveys in North Carolina, she monitors this. If she sees something unusual, she'll call us and she'll say, hey, we got a problem here. We'll stop things and we'll backtrack.
So the survey is open to anybody, and that's, the one side. But maybe based on Rich's question, you want to talk about the focus groups and the kind of focus groups you're considering recommending.
We've defined them.
Yeah, we've talked about those when we met in the Zoom, but basically.
Right, but the rest of the board hasn't
Right.
heard that.
Teachers, administrators, how you break your administrative team down. I can't remember. We had about 8 or 9.
Yeah, we had students,
Student
union.
council.
Union. We also talked about the BPAC group, and we talked about in the evening having an open.
Anybody comes.
Anybody could come who maybe
English
couldn't
and
come
Spanish.
during the day.
There'd be two separate forums, a Spanish language forum
That
and an
is
English
correct,
language
yes.
forum, so that people would be able to participate if they
Right,
chose to.
either way they would like, right.
You mentioned teachers, but it would be open to all employees, not just teachers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, support staff as well, right.
What we've seen, in all honesty, is that with the advent of an online survey, the participation in person has dropped dramatically. People fill out the survey, they can do it at home, on their phone, whatever it is, but to come in person takes a little extra effort. So we see less involved in the attendance of these small group meetings. We're there to take in the information, whomever it is. But the days where you used to get a big crowd, haven't seen that in years. Unless there's some big controversy. Yeah, if you're closing a school, changing boundaries shakes up a whole community. And so those kind of things turn out crowd. But then we have the problem of directing people to the leadership qualities that we're looking for, not the political situation within the district. So that's where we spend some time in those small groups, keeping people.
Sounds like our focus efforts would be more reliable in terms of what our actual people want than necessarily opening a survey to anybody that can get online and wants to respond.
Well, you have a big community. I think in order to get a fair representation, you do open it up.
We'll see separate results, right? We'll see, this is what came from the survey, and this is what
Oh,
came
yeah,
from the focus
yeah.
group. So if they're skewing one way or another between the two, it will be apparent then, I would expect.
Yes.
In all the cases that we've had, you're gonna start to see commonalities come up from the board
Yeah,
interviews.
that's what we're looking for.
For the focus groups and for the surveys. If, Bob, for example, we see this thing that's just a real outlier, then we'll definitely take a look at that again. We do not take the surveys and break it down by looking at their IP addresses and that type of
Yeah,
thing.
we can't do that, otherwise people won't put it in. We can, if somebody did something unusual, Rich, we can track that. But we don't do that.
Questions that the board would have for us? We're ready to move on and do our thing.
Gary or Kathy, any questions?
Bless you.
Thank you.
No, I'm fine.
Kathy, any questions? No. All right, thank you very much, and thank you for the updates, and obviously you'll be keeping us informed.
Thanks, I think, again, we're off to a really good start. In 1 week to have 13 applicants.
It's good to hear, that's a good start. Lucky 13.
If we said nobody, then I think we'd be in a panic.
Right,
But
exactly.
we're in good shape.
All right.
Good to
Thank you
see
very much.
everybody.
Nice
Good to see
all
you.
today.
Nice to see all of you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Very
too.
nice job. Very good job.
Alrighty then, that brings us to summer 2024 construction projects.
Fantastic. So as you might recall from last month's budget presentation, we noted that there are multiple projects planned for the summer of 2024, so we're going to take a closer look. So based on the DLA facility plan, the pool and Geneva parking lots are in need of resurfacing and reconstruction. Additionally, the pool roof is due for replacement, along with the maintenance garage and then the concession stand across the street at the stadium. We plan to utilize Olson Roofing again to replace those roofs, similar to when we replaced the roof, the kitchen roof last year. We're also looking to update washrooms in the math and science areas, along with the 2 small bathrooms on either side of the auditorium. Lastly, on this slide, we want to provide another level of security at entrance B in that attendance area. This would provide a security storefront, vestibule, and door to ensure students are separated from guests when they first enter the building.
Is that an item that came out of the security audit that we did? Or is that separate?
That was not in that security audit. That was a recommendation from Veronica as we looked at how that space was being used and how our students were basically in the same space as any guests that enter at entrance B.
The small auditorium washrooms, are those the old washrooms?
Yes.
Okay. Not the new ones we just put.
No, not the new ones.
On the sides of the theater, not in front.
I was going to say, it's the front ones, we just did those.
Those are brand new.
Yep. Next, based on the life safety recommendations, we plan to replace the doors noted here and correct the guardrail locations in that old section of the building.
Guardrail correction, what's being corrected?
So the guardrails are, because they were installed in 1926, the guardrails, based off of new guidelines, are supposed to be a little bit higher. They're supposed to be a little narrower, just some things that DLA.
Bring you up to code then.
Right. Storage has always and will continue to be an issue with any school. The fieldhouse storage was initially designed by DLA 9 years ago, and at that time was decided not to move forward with that project. As we took a closer look at that project, we don't believe it's going to provide as much of the storage solution as we would like. So as such, we're going to look for other solutions for the board to consider. And then lastly, and similar to last year, we have some doors to replace, such as the auditorium doors and the entrance by the art rooms, among a few others. So DLA has proposed the following fees for overseeing this work: 9.5% of the construction cost, and then a flat fee of $41,500 for the parking lots. And we'll bring that to the board at the October board meeting for approval. Any questions on construction?
And beyond what you've outlined for life safety, is there anything else on life safety that still remains to be done?
The projects that we have noted are the only projects noted by DLA in that life safety recommendation. So we would have no other life safety issues after that.
Thank you.
Next is the ISB school maintenance grant. ISB is once again providing a school maintenance grant, which allows a matching grant for $50,000. One of the options for that grant is life safety recommendations, which aligns nicely with our planned projects. And I'll let the board know if and when we are awarded with that grant. Any questions on the ISB school maintenance? Moving on to hazardous routes. As bus routes were established this year, we discussed the establishment of some hazardous routes. This discussion led to further review of the routes. So for some background information, per Illinois School Code, any student who lives further than 1.5 miles from the school or must walk an approved hazardous route is eligible for free transportation from the district. Hazardous routes are established by utilizing the instructions and scoring system from IDOT. and that if a student must walk to school and meets the threshold on the scoring system, then the board can approve the route as hazardous. On occasion, routes that a board would deem as hazardous does not meet the threshold. On those occasions, a board can add a point or two to meet those thresholds and call it hazardous. IDOT will review and hopefully approve any routes as hazardous. So that was a little bit of the background. As we reviewed our current routes, we found that all students living further than 1.5 miles currently receive free transportation to school. We also determined that we do not have any official hazardous routes established, but we do have some unofficial hazardous routes. The two areas that were of greatest concern for us were any student that would cross Route 59 or cross Route 38, which is Roosevelt Road. We are recommending that the board officially approve Roosevelt Road and Route 59 as hazardous routes, and that our students should not have to walk across those streets. The scoring system from IDOT would warrant a hazardous route designation for Roosevelt Road based on lack of sidewalks, speed of traffic, and the amount of traffic. Now, believe it or not, Route 59 would not warrant a hazardous route designation on its own, as there are traffic lights and sidewalks along that entire path. I think we can all agree that Route 59 should be considered hazardous. And this is where the board could add a point or two to say that Route 59 is hazardous to cross. The results of designating these routes as hazardous would not affect any students south of Roosevelt Road, as all students already have free transportation. We would need to establish one new route for the students east of Route 59. We currently have 51 students that are currently not on a bus route. Breaking that down by age is we have 16 freshman students, 13 sophomore, 11 juniors, and 11 seniors in that 51 students. So there's an obvious extra cost for adding a route, but Illinois Central has noted that they are able to accommodate. I've also added this extra cost into the budget that was approved in September, just in case. And if the board is in agreement, we'll bring a motion to the board in October to approve these as hazardous routes.
So at this point, you're looking for whether there's a board consensus to move forward with this?
Correct.
All right, board members, what do you think?
Seems like a good idea to me. Did something prompt this, or this is just something you saw was overlooked? Or?
No, nothing prompt that. It's been, I'm in my 5th year here. It was something that came up initially, and then COVID hit, and some people moved around, and now that we're back in full swing of things, it came back up again with new people in place, and so it was just something that we wanted to address and to look closer into.
Excellent. Well, thank you for noticing that. Thank you.
If we did this,
Both of those roads had numerous accidents all the time, and a history of having students hit and other pedestrians, so to me it makes perfect sense. They are both very hazardous, whether you're walking or in a car.
Rich, you were saying?
if we do this, does this become precedenting that if sometime in the future we need that money for something else, we can back down on the 59 hazardous designation?
So this would be a hazardous route that would be approved each year.
Okay, so it's a yearly.
It's a
kind
common
of a thing.
practice. Most school districts in Illinois annually approve designated hazardous routes
Okay.
and review those.
Okay, so we're not saying this is a forever kind of a thing if
No,
we do it to
literally,
begin
it's a
with.
it's a 1 year, and I would encourage you that no later than late fall, sometime early winter, that this board should review their hazardous crossings and vote to approve either the current ones or make changes as necessary.
So this would be in addition to our annual agenda, basically a new
It should
thing
be
every
part
year.
of your annual agenda, and again, I would say late fall, early winter, so that the administration can prepare, talk to the bus company, because that's the whole time when students start registering and planning for the next year starts. And one of the first simple steps, it's kind of like doing the calendar for the next year. Make sure that you've checked the box of reviewing and approving your new hazard.
Okay, I support 59 as a hazardous crossing as long as we can review that on a yearly basis.
It would be awfully difficult to pull that back, though, don't you think?
There would have to probably be some sort of a change
Yeah.
if they added more lights or if there was, I don't know, a full-time crossing guard there or a bridge or some sort of change that would make it that the board would consider that not to be hazardous.
As long as we have that option.
And every year, you can also look at what the usage data is as well.
How many students we have that would have to cross it, that sort of thing. Gary, did you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, bring it forward.
Could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear that.
Bring it forward.
Move it forward?
Move it forward.
Would that amount change every year based on the number of students then also?
It wouldn't be based on the number of students, it would be based on the route itself.
Oh, I
That's
see.
how
Okay.
the Illinois Central contract is written up, is based on routes.
Oh,
Will be part of the
gotcha.
negotiation with the bus company, basically.
Yes.
Well, and what the need is too, because you're always going to find efficiencies, and because there's a limit on how many students can ride one bus, and then the time frame that the bus company has to get the route completed. And so that can vary from year to year. Every school district deals with shifts where students live, and that can greatly impact how many buses or the timing of buses, et cetera. So.
What does 33 do on 59? Because they have the same set of students and the same problem there.
Yeah, 33 has a lengthy list of hazardous routes that they've already established, and they do approve those every year. That they have no student crosses 59 for District 33.
All right, it sounds like you have a board consensus to move forward with
More
this.
questions, Rich? I see it in your face.
I don't believe that.
No student from District 33 crosses Route 59.
I'm confident that that is accurate too. Yeah, and they do have quite an extensive list of hazardous crossings.
Well, I know students that live east of 59 that go to Turner for sure. So how they get there,
Just because busing is available, that doesn't mean that all parents utilize that. So, yeah, I can't speak to specific families certainly, but I do know that they have many hazardous crossings listed.
I understand. I think, from where I know people that live east of 59, that's probably less than a mile and a half from Turner. I'll have to check on that. I guess if there's an opportunity to combine routes or something.
Yeah, and John kind of mentioned that before, that they're gonna, Illinois Central or whoever our bus company is, they'll definitely review routes each year and see where students are placed, and there's a good possibility that the students currently in that area would just be on a bus that we normally would have, and that wouldn't raise our routes, and we could keep the 14 routes that we normally have.
And Turner's a block west of 59, and I know there's people that live east of 59 that would be well within that 1.5 mile distance.
Yep. And it says, it lists Route 59 on their hazardous routes that no student is going to walk across that, or any student would be eligible for free transportation.
Okay, so this will be showing up on our regular October meeting then for approval.
Yes.
Sounds good. So that brings us to tax levy timetable.
All right, so just a little overview on the tax levy details. In order to calculate the levy, we need to know the December 2022 CPI, which was 6.5%. The property tax extension limitation law limits this increase to 5%, not including new property. As an FYI, currently CPI is trending around 4%, give or take, so hopefully that stays underneath 5% come December. We also need to know the EAV and new construction, both of which I'm waiting on the assessors to close their books and get those estimates. So based on that information, we know our potential request could be more than 5%, which would require a truth in taxation hearing, which the board approved for the 2022 tax levy last year at the November 2022 board meeting. Depending on the direction that the board chooses, I'll either present the tax levy in November or at the next board meeting in October. With the truth and taxation hearing, the levy needs to be public for 20 days, making it a little longer process. Either way, that tax levy needs to be submitted to the county by December 26th of 2023. The levy requesting the full amount would be an estimated 6.04% over last year's extension. This would be a request of just over $30 million. If the board decides to not levy over 5%, the request would be at $29.7 million. This would leave a loss of potential tax revenue of just under $300,000. This is an amount that would never be recovered, and that loss would also compound each year. As you consider the impact to the community, here's a breakdown of the expected impact on taxpayers for a request of more than 5% compared to one for less than 5%.
I think we had this discussion last year and decided to pursue the more than 5% option.
Correct. So some of the reasons to request that full amount, we still have almost $15 million in facility plan projects. This does not include any of those unforeseen projects that always pop up. Additionally, this does not include any of the projects that are in early stages of planning, like building branding or any other potential storage solutions. As I prepared a worst case scenario forecast, we see a potential deficit in FY28. Again, this is a worst case scenario that I believe can be managed as the years go on, but still wanted to note. We still have increases to salaries, benefits, busing, construction costs, just to name a few. And then lastly, we have revenues that are going away or declining. We're in the last year of ESSER funding. In the coming years, we expect CPPRT to go back to normal. Property taxes variables such as CPI and new construction are expected to go down. And the district at some point in time will move to Tier 2 for EVF. So from there, I just wanted to get, again, a sense from the board of...
You're looking for, do we want to go for the full amount or keep it under the 5%?
Correct.
Go for the full amount because they're going to need it. We're heading into a recession again, and we're going to see a lot of broken buildings along with a loss of construction and an increase in foreclosure. So you're going to need the money.
Thank you for providing this slide on the examples, the impacts on the taxpayers, because that's very helpful. And yeah, I think we should just go for the full amount. I mean, at this point.
I'm good with that. I think the critical thing to note is that whatever we lose, we continue to lose,
Right.
compounded every year. We never recover that.
Gary?
So I'm going to go with different. I prefer to stay with the 5% cap just yet this time.
All right, well, it sounds like we do have a board consensus to go for the full amount.
Okay.
So that sets your timetable.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, tell us about cafeteria furniture
Right.
and other furniture.
Yeah, and other furniture. So 2 years ago, we purchased various shaped tables for the commons to replace the old round tables. We would like to replace the old brown long tables that are still in commons. As we went through that process, we really wanted to make sure that the furniture would be flexible and easy to move, inviting for students, staff, community members, but also has to seat approximately 550 students. So
These are not replacing what we just bought during COVID. These are replacing older things.
correct. So we discussed that internally, and we also discussed with some students to get some of their ideas. So based on those discussions, we have the following recommendations. To accommodate the 550 students, we need the 22 long tables. The interesting thing about the long tables were that before we talked with students, they were all going to be straight. after we talk with students, there's going to be, half of those are going to be wavy and half of them are going to be straight. And so we also, the students were really excited about the booths. So we made sure we got 6 of those. And then lastly is the conversation tables, as they're called. And we wanted 8 of those, and we really think that those are going to be utilized throughout the building for various events. And I think they're good. They're a good table for us to use everywhere. So all of the tables are from AmTab, as we've been happy with the design and the quality of the tables that we purchased 2 years ago from them. All the tables come assembled, so it should be easy to install when they arrive in January. And the students were very happy to hear that that they were going to actually be able to sit at some of these tables. That initially they were thinking that this was going to come over the summer and they weren't going to have to be able to enjoy it. So they were excited when I said it should deliver in January. I'll back up one quick question. The total cost of those is $117,000 for all those tables. And additionally, we have some regular classroom items that were requested from department heads and includes the items listed there. The total proposal is $76,000, not including installation. Although I did recently receive the quote for installation, it was almost $10,000. So I'm going to be looking for other options, which most likely will be just in-house installing, putting those together. So overall, the cost of the cafeteria and classroom furniture is close to $200,000, which was included in the budget, and I'll be bringing the quotes to the board in October for approval. Any other questions on the furniture?
All right, that brings us to credit card processing and web store.
Great. So the MIS office and the business office, we would like to move on from RevTrack. The funny part about that is we were talking with the business office, was talking with MIS, and we're like, do you guys really like RevTrack? And they're like, no, we hate RevTrack. And we're like, we hate RevTrack too. And it's probably been, we've all hated RevTrack for like the last couple of years, and nobody said anything about it.
Wait, how many years?
Last couple of years.
Oh.
I have to say, as my experience as a parent, I was no big fan of it either.
Yeah, so RevTrack they were great 10 years ago, and they're the same as they were 10 years ago.
That says it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we looked into making that move, we considered cost, ease of use for families and staff, and lastly, it had to have integration with PowerSchool. So we had 2 demos, one from eFunds and one from My School Bucks. We asked a third company, they didn't respond. There are some other options out there, but they don't integrate directly with PowerSchool, and so we did not investigate those. We were impressed with both eFunds and My School Bucks. We checked with other schools regarding their experiences and were provided positive responses for both those options. And so after the review of the demos, consideration to cost, ease of use, and PowerSchool integration, we intend to move forward with eFunds pending that board approval at the October board meeting. Any questions?
That would start beginning of next year.
I'm sorry?
That would start the beginning of next year.
They would start that implementation around winter break, ready for next year registration, which would start in February.
Cards?
What is the fee structure compared to what we have now?
It would save us some money, Gary, if that was the question. I'm not.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Gary, can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I was asking what the fee structure was of the 2 options, the current and the other option.
The fee structure.
Yes.
It would save us money, yeah. Yeah, the fee structure is, RevTrack is at 4%, while eFunds is at 3.6%, and plus 22 cents per transaction, where RevTrack was plus 35 cents per transaction. There's no setup fee. eFunds does have a $350 annual fee, but I still expect it to save us some funds on an annual basis.
Just happen to know how many transactions go through this?
I do not
Like
know
it-
that number.
No, like thousands, tens of
Um,
thousands?
Well,
Is it
we
multiple?
just had thousands for homecoming. It's a lot.
Oh, so it's used for like multiple things all throughout the year, so actually that's pretty significant, the 35 cents versus the 22 cents.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sounds like it's moving us in a very good direction.
yeah, okay.
Great.
Excellent, Dan.
Other school districts are switching from RevTrak also fairly
Correct.
quickly, correct?
Correct.
Better shape up.
Any other questions or comments about the credit card processing in Web Store?
This is a physical card, like a Visa or a Discover, that the students would use?
The families would use, they can use Visa or MasterCard, Discover.
Oh, so they use their own credit cards, and it just goes into the system then?
It's connected to
this
the,
is-
it's connected to the
this is-
website, right?
This is
a
the software.
Payment processing
Yeah.
system.
Okay, it's not a
For
card
receiving
that students
payments.
get for
No.
No,
meals and things like that?
no.
Okay.
Parent wants to pay for registration
So it's
fees,
like
they can use
Square
their
or
credit.
something.
Correct. That's
Exactly,
exactly. what it is,
exactly.
yep.
All right, that sounds like a good deal. That moves us to course proposals, 2024 to 2025.
Believe it or not, we are now into the part of the year where we are planning for the 24-25 school year. Tonight, I'd like to share proposed changes we plan to make to course offerings for next school year. These proposed changes have gone through 2 reviews at the end of last school year and beginning of this school year with our contractual collaboration committee made up of staff and administrators. For next year, we are planning to add the 7 courses that you see here, as well as 2 course name changes I'll share on the next slide. I'll briefly describe those proposals here tonight and then send the course proposal forms to the board ahead of the October 17th board meeting. The first additional course would be the Modern College Rhetoric that would be added in the English department. This would be for what we call transitional credit with our local community college, meaning that students who take and pass this course would articulate into a credit-bearing English course at COD regardless of SAT or other standardized test score. The next 2 courses are similar, and while they are new, they would essentially be replacing our existing pre-calculus and honors pre-calculus. College Board has developed and is now offering advanced placement pre-calculus and advanced placement pre-calculus. Essentially, AP pre-calculus students would go into Calc AB the following year, and AP pre-calculus advanced students would go into Calc BC. The difference now is there would be a corresponding AP exam, and they would receive that AP acknowledgement on their transcript. The 4th class is one that we're very excited about, and we've been working across multiple divisions to develop, is Geometry in Construction. This would be a 2-period class taught by both a math and a CTE teacher in which students would take and get credit for 2 courses, both their geometry credit as sophomores, as well as a credit in the CTE department, and they would work to build literal construction items such as sheds. There are some schools that have gotten very ambitious and they've built homes. We will not be at that point next school year, but there's a lot of excitement to it, and it would be a great collaboration between our CTE and math departments. Our next 2 courses would both be a semester long, and we would hope many students who took the first one would take the second one as well. It's Introduction to Healthcare 1 and 2. These would be blended courses, meaning some days the students would meet in person, other days the students would have their own time to work on the courses. We already have multiple courses that operate that way successfully within the school. This would introduce students to the healthcare fields and give them some hands-on experiences in multiple healthcare procedures and understandings as they're beginning to determine whether or not they want that to be a career path that they would choose. And again, hopefully those students would take our anatomy courses and even some AP science courses as they look at what lies next for them after high school. The final new course we are proposing is called Drone Technology. This is an incredibly growing field, and with both the development and repair of drones, the field is really expanding. There's a lot of opportunity, as well as the opportunity to use drones for things such as the construction field, as well as in the mining and oil development field. We, in fact, during the construction of our new wing that we're in right now, You remember Dean Claypatch used his drone rather adeptly to create a great video in the middle of the construction development. This would be a course of one semester to introduce students to that field and get them a science credit at the same time. The next is the changes that we would like to make. We currently have a course called Studio Art in our handbook. It's a rather generic listing, and it's for students who are taking advanced art options, and they end up in a course simultaneous with our 2 art teachers, either in ceramics or 3D art or graphic art. We would replace that one name with 4 separate names, and the change really is so that our counselors can more accurately place those students taking advanced study in the appropriate period in which painting is happening, or drawing is happening, or 3D art or digital. It's really just going to help us from a scheduling standpoint. And the final change is we want to change the name of our cooperative work training to more accurately be called business internship, to be a better reflection of what the course actually is. I'll take any questions or comments the board may have at this time as we prepare to ask for approval of these at the October regular board meeting.
I noticed during halftime at the football game that somebody had a drone out on the field. I think they were taking pictures of the dance group or the cheerleaders. Seems like the drone technology might also fit in with our video program.
Yeah, we actually have a drone club that is started at the school by Mr. Singer, and I had to eat a lot of crow when I saw how many kids actually got involved in the drone club, and the individual who's doing that Friday night was with the drone club. We actually use them, the football team uses them in the summer to fly above practice to video it. No longer do you see students getting up on towers or getting high up to take film. It's really happening with drones now. It's pretty incredible.
Very cool.
During the PEP assembly, they were having fun harassing the interim superintendent on the field, too. Being buzzed by the drone.
It's important to note the principal did not tell him to do that.
That's pushing it for being tall.
I thought it was a large insect at first and started swatting at it.
That sounds like some exciting changes to the courses. That's very
It
cool.
really does.
We'll be sending you the packets that the division heads developed for each course, along with the very similar memo to what you've already received for approval in October. Next, we have the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. In 2021, a team of teachers began working with administration to build the curriculum that has formed the backbone of our Den Time curriculum for the social emotional well-being of our students. When we began that work, one of the pillars was a book called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. This book is written for schools, families, and other organizations that work with young people to support their emotional well-being. Since its publication, the author, Mark Brackett, has opened the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale University. The center provides professional development and research in the area of SEL across age spectrums. We originally had hoped to send a team to one of their on-campus workshops, which I have understood to be incredibly enlightening and productive. However, because of the pandemic, many of those in-person opportunities were eliminated or very limited. Now they have a very robust online offering that we would like to take some of our admin and teacher leaders to give them the opportunity to participate in that online learning. This will allow us to continue our shared learning as we refine, enhance, and continue to evolve our DEN curriculum that is different and evolves for each of our grade levels. We plan to ask for formal approval at the October board meeting this year. And just so the board is aware too, that book, Permission to Feel, we were able to, during the pandemic, purchase copies for all staff members who could voluntarily read the book and participate in some group learning. It's very popular, and if you have a young person at home, I do recommend reading it.
What is the name of it?
Permission to Feel.
On the screen.
And if you would like a copy, we do have some extras that we could definitely give the board.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. That brings us to Booster Club signage.
Hey. Believe it or not, I had to go back and check my notes. We had a conversation in May of 2022. At that time, the board agreed, in accordance with board policy, to allow our Booster Club to sell 8 advertising spaces on the fence along Wood Street. The program generated $9,600 of revenue for the boosters. After accounting for production costs and holding back replacement funds for possibly damaged signs, it generated $8,000 of extra revenue for the boosters. At the end of this school year, the original 2-year deal, which the board indicated they were comfortable with, will expire for 7 of the 8 signs. The Booster Club has engaged myself and our current athletic director, Mr. Perry, in conversations about permission to A, continue the program, but also to potentially expand the program. Remembering back to our May of 2022 conversation, the board was comfortable with this initial foray into advertising and asked that we bring back the program at a later time to update on how it has gone and to see how we felt the comfort level of the board would be at that time to potentially expand it. After conversations with the Booster Club, they would like to expand. They would like to go from 8 signs along the fencing on Wood Street to 16 signs. They indicated that the initial 8 signs sold very quickly, and they believe that 8 local businesses would be more than happy, 8 more would be more than happy to advertise as well. They also wanted to revisit the conversation that we had in May of 2022 about advertising inside of Bishop Gym. At that time, the board was a bit split about whether or not we were comfortable with that, and we agreed to try out the outdoor signs and revisit it. As a reminder, the boosters would like to look at the possibility of 4 3-foot by 3-foot banners inside Bishop Gym along the west wall, which would be near the main scoreboard, but obviously not on the scoreboard. Last time we did this, Mr. Nagel, you did a wonderful job of gathering some sentiment of the board for us ahead of time. And then Bob, as I actually rewatched the video, riveting for all of us from a year and a half ago, I did a great job of gauging again where the board was at with that comfort level. So I am looking for some feedback similar to what we did about a year and a half ago.
I have a question, first of all, just looking at these photos with the 8 signs, but so would they all be on the same fence line? So
I would really want to work with both our athletic director as well as Mr. Pater in charge of buildings and grounds to make sure that we're doing the best aesthetically that we can. Eyeballing it, and I'm not the most talented administrator at this, there is room for 4 more to the north and 4 more to the south. So we could have 16 in that space. We could look to go to some just north of the visitor bleachers. So as you got past that visitor entrance, there's options, but I really think it's one of those where we lay it out and we look at what makes the most sense.
I don't know, I remember some of the discussion was a little concerned on the inside ones about it's much more in your face. You're kind of a captive audience as opposed to, okay, you see it when you're going in and out of the football stadium, that sort of thing.
I think my concern has always been that the school should be kind of a sanctuary for students away from the constant bandying of advertising, buy this, buy this, buy this. I think by bringing it in, you're not only introducing it to spectators, but also to the students that are in the gym for instructional purposes and curriculum and things. So I'm surprised, pleased that we are generating that much funds on just the 8 signs, and I'm comfortable with adding more on the field as long as they're low and well done and nicely presented. But I'd have to think a little bit more about putting stuff in the Bishop Gym.
What do you think, Lynn?
I agree 100% with what Rich is saying. Yeah.
Gary?
I support having additional outside ones. I oppose strongly any inside ones.
Kathy? Kathy, do you have thoughts on the matter?
If it helps the boosters, then I think we should do it. It just isn't that big of a deal to me. And the boosters work really hard to support the kids. I just don't see it as that big of an issue.
All right, so it sounds like there's pretty strong board support for looking at the additional outside signage, and it might be a tough sell on the inside ones.
As a reminder, board policy 8:125 We don't need to take a vote, but rather I think you've given me clear direction, and we'll work with the boosters in accordance with those guidelines.
All right, sounds fair. That brings us to Appendix B recommendations.
And this is the last item of the evening, and you're probably ready to be done.
Not least.
But not least, yes. The Appendix B committee meets at least 3 times a year, and it's comprised of members of the Teacher Association, Support Staff Association, and the administration. And the role of that committee is, of course, to bring recommendations to the board. We review data from the athletic director and the activities director, look at current needs and anticipated future needs, and then bring forward some recommendations. So we did have our first meeting of the year and have 2 recommendations that we'd like to bring forward in October. So sharing those with you this evening for any potential discussion. The first of those is the permanent addition of 1 assistant sponsor for IHSA drama. We had talked a bit about this position last year. The high school has participated in IHSA drama for a long time. I think it's around 14 years at this point. Participation is high, about 20 to 30 students annually, and in a number of competitions, some of which are local and some of which require travel and substantial supervision. And last year when we brought a 1-year recommendation, there were a couple of positions that had gone vacant that were plays or musicals that did not have an assistant director. And so we requested a reallocation of those funds and then promised we'd revisit that again this year after seeing kind of how it went. It was a really successful, a great addition to the program. We do see that as a permanent need. And so the Appendix B committee unanimously recommends that permanent addition. We also reviewed the positions that currently exist within the Appendix B structure. And one group that stands out that has gone vacant for some time is the steppers position. And so the Appendix B committee does recommend the elimination of that position. Steppers has not run since before the pandemic. There's really no indication of student interest in that group. And we do see that that target audience has other very robust options, such as Alegria and the dance team. And so we know that those groups are thriving, and perhaps that's where that student interest has traveled to. And so although that's gone unfilled for some time, we would recommend the elimination of that position from the Appendix B structure. So at this time, I'd just like to open it up for any questions or discussion on those recommendations.
Good to me.
Gary, any thoughts? What was that?
Bring it forward for approval.
Kathy, any thoughts?
It's unfortunate to see the loss of the stuffers that involves a lot of students who might not fit into other programs comfortably. So I'm disappointed to hear about that, but move it forward for approval if that's where we're going.
All right, so will this be on the October regular agenda then?
That is correct.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Can we figure out why it's so hard to understand them? Is it their phones or is it our system? Could we figure out a way to improve that? It's unfortunate that we tend to have a couple of people always on tele, and we're not getting the value I think we should be.
Right.
Good point.
I
It's a
feel
good
like
point.
if
It's worth looking into.
If we try to Zoom as opposed to the phone, it might be more clear.
I wonder if having the two people on the same call is somehow degrading the quality or something. I don't know.
Well, I think when we've just had Gary on, it's still been
Yeah.
a problem. But yeah, with Zoom, I get a lot better reception.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely worth looking into. All right, at this point, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Are they saying something now, or are they being sarcastic now?
I think it's feedback.
From when you talk.
Oh, they're listening online to you when you talk.
Oh, okay, that explains it. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?